Okay, this is Laureen from codingcertification.org, and I wanted to take a moment to explain ICD-9 poisoning and adverse effect coding. This is a tricky area, and actually, when I've taught it, the sequencing has gotten messed up. So I wanted to do a clarification video here. So this is how you do poison and adverse effect coding. What you want to do is turn in your ICD index to the table of drugs and chemicals. That's right in the middle. Your index has three parts to it. The first part is the index to diseases. The second part is this table of drugs and chemicals. And the third part is the index to E-codes. So what you want to do is turn to any page and probably copy these notes in. They're very helpful to have. And what you'll see on the left-hand side is a column with all the substances that we have poisoning codes for. And then in the last 5 columns, we've got the external E-codes. And there's different ways these substances can get into the body and be considered a poison. It could be by accident. It could be therapeutic use, which I'll go over in more detail in a minute, suicide attempt, assault, or undetermined. So picture a patient comes into the ER. They were found by the EMTs. They had a bottle of pills next to them and they're unconscious. They're in a coma. So how would you code that as a coder? In the documentation, if it says suspected suicide, we don't code it as suicide because it's suspected. So we code it as undetermined. Okay, if they said it was a known suicide attempt, there was a note, that's how it's documented, then we would code it as a suicide. And this is how it would work. The first thing we have to do is identify the substance. Okay, so let's just say it's this first one here, acetylcholine. And the poison code for that is 971.0. So that would go in the first position. And that's where I have under here my sequencing. The first thing is going to be the poison code, pull from this column. Okay, so 971.0. Then the next thing we're going to code is the condition. So in this case I said they're in a coma. So we're going to do our normal, ICD coding lookup and code a coma. That will be the second code on the claim form. And then the last piece is the E code. Now if the documentation said it was definitely a suicide, we're going to pull from this column. So we would code E95.0. If it's a suspected suicide, we're going to code E980.4 because it's undetermined. If the documentation says, oh, the spouse is poisoning the coffee, that's an assault. That's E96.20. If it was an accident, like maybe a kid got something under the counter, some cleaning supplies, it's E855.3. Okay, so that's how you code a poisoning. You code the poison code first, the condition second, the E code last. And you could have more than one condition code, obviously. Now, how do we code an adverse effect? Basically, an adverse effect is coded the same way as a poison code, except you leave off the poisoning code. Otherwise, it looks like the physician poisoned the patient, and that's not the story we want to tell. So the first thing we're going to do is code the condition. So let's say they took a prescription as prescribed, and they break out in a rash, they break out in hives. You're going to code that first. And then second, you're going to code the E code, and here my note says use therapeutic use for adverse effects. That's what this therapeutic use column is for. It means the patient took it as prescribed. It wasn't an accidental overdose like double dose. They forgot that they took their meds in the morning. If that's the case, you code it as a poisoning and you choose from the accident column. But therapeutic use means they took it as prescribed and they had a reaction. Okay? So obviously you'll see some dashes in here for some things because these are substances that would never ever be prescribed. Therefore, therapeutic use doesn't apply. Okay? So for an adverse effect, you don't code a poisoning code. You code the condition first, and then you use the therapeutic use E code. Okay? So hopefully that will help clarify things with coding poisoning and adverse effect codes for ICD-9.